Good evening to everyone. Today we will proceed with the nutrition topics, especially with animal feeds and fodders and other classification. So there are varieties of the animal feeds are there, and also the fodders which need to be classified, which is as per the syllabus, which is ongoing, especially the program. And the common livestock feed can be classified into the three categories. Number one, the cultivated feed, then feed supplements and feed additives. Then the another thing is the natural vegetation, or it is also called as the grazing. And the cultivated fodder is classified into green and, or it's also called as succulent and dry, whereas the natural vegetation is classified into grassland, pasture and trees. These are three different classifications. So when coming to the green or succulent fodder is concerned, then you can see here it is classified as the fodder crops and also the silage, then grass, then fodder trees also are also there. The fodder trees are also there. Hence, we need to concentrate on all these particular things. So, the non-leguminous and leguminous, the fodder trees can be classified into such simple calculations. Then the dry matter can be classified into straws or stovers. Then silage. Another thing, it is the making up of the silage is also another storage form, and we need to concentrate on this particular thing, especially how to make a silage. So later we will see in the forthcoming classes. The next one is the concentrates. Yesterday we have discussed about the energy requirement of the cattle, and the energy requirement is also met from both the concentrates and also from the dry matter. So the concentrates are rich in carbohydrates, rich in protein, and sometimes both moderate. It is balanced diet ultimately. So rich in carbohydrate means what are all the things? Number one, grains. Lot of varieties of the grains are also there. Then millets. So both of these will constitute very rich in the carbohydrates. So you know the sources of the carbohydrates are also from the maize, then ragi, and the bajra, and many more things are there as the source of the energy. Then something which is very rich in the protein are being supplied from the oil cakes. Different type of the oil cakes are there. Maybe the cottonseed cake, soya cake, then the different other cakes. Then also the feed may be made rich in the protein by adding the animal proteins. Of course, nowadays this has been reduced drastically. Even then, in beef cattle, already this is being added in the higher quantity. So the next one is both moderate, which is mixed. Type is gram, then pulses, then wheat bran or the bran, rice bran, etc. These are all mixed to make the compound feed. And we will see how to make a prepare a compound feed in the forthcoming classes. So the cattle do require the feed in the form of the roughage to make it bulk. So the roughage is classified into varieties of the uh, substances, more nutrients per unit weight. So it is containing the crude fiber as 18%. For example, the maize straws, the paddy straws, and many more type of the straws, as you know very well, these constitute the roughage. Whereas the concentrates, they always do known as the crude fiber more than 80%, but more nutrients per unit weight in terms of the energy and also in terms of the proteins, as you know very well, because the concentrates do contain the mixture of the energy and supplements from the maize, then also the cakes like sunflower cake, groundnut cake, soya cake, and many more type of the cakes are also added to add them more and more nutrients. Hence, they provide more nutrients. Whereas the maintenance type of the ration is the roughage having 2 to 3% DCP or digestible crude protein. So you know what are all the yesterday we have seen what is a crude protein, what's a digestible crude protein, etc. So these are X cereal fodders and there A or the grams. Varieties of the grams are there. Then accordingly these are obtained from different type of the grams. As you know, the wastage products of the human food, especially the cereal food. So these also make the bulk of the cattle feed, and hence they are one of the cheap sources but very much required to the cattle nutrition is concerned. Hence we need to concentrate on the roughage also. So then another thing is the production type. The roughage having DCP, for example, the lucerne and the green grass or many other grasses do have the DCP more than 3%. And example, the leguminous fodders like the lucerne, etc., berseem, and many more things are there. Whereas another thing is the sustainable type, or it's also called as the ration which need to be given to the cattle whenever there is a drought. So this is also known as the roughage which is having DCP below 2% is also okay. Just the sustenance ration means whenever the animal is having lot of starvation or drought, when human being himself is suffering, then they will be provided with the grass which is containing very low quality roughage. So whereas the livestock, let us come to the introduction of the classification of feedstuffs which are available to the livestock. So, as we know very well that the livestock play an important role, especially in case of the small and marginal scale farming. They provide traction to cultivate fields and also manure to maintain the crop productivity and nutritious food products for human consumption as well. And also they play a very important role in the developing world like India and Africa and Pakistan, etc. And they are the backbone of the farmers economy, especially in India, who depend upon 70% people are in the rural India, and most of them do have the habit of the animal husbandry practices. So this is the basis how all these cattle or the livestock need to be provided with the foodstuffs. As I have already explained, the foodstuff need to be given in the form of the roughages and also the concentrate. Then there are many classes of these are there, and also additionally we need to supplement the vitamins, minerals, then the supplementation of sometimes the mineral mixtures or urea also to some extent to the concentrates are concerned. Whereas the roughages, we can classify them as the succulent roughage, already you have seen, then dry roughage. So animal feeds always do contain the roughage and also the concentrates. Then we also need to supply them the additional minerals apart from the minerals which are present in both of these things. Then apart from this one, non-nutritive feed additives are also there. It may also include the antibiotics sometimes, then feed supplements, then some of the ingredients which are essential for the proper digestion of, especially in case of cattle, like enzymes and etc. So the energy and protein are the main components of the animal feed, And coming to the energy, yesterday we have seen what are all the sources of the energy, etc. The protein may be plant protein or animal protein. Especially the animal proteins are not commonly used in case of cattle feed, except the beef cattle. In Indian scenario, the animal origin feed, for example, the fish meal or blood meal, etc., are not commonly used in case of preparation of the cattle feed is concerned. Then the roughage are bulky feeds containing relatively large amount of less digestible materials. So there are two major types of the roughages are there. One is the succulent, means it contains about 60 to 70% of the moisture, whereas the dry roughages do contain 10 to 15% of the moisture based on these are classified into the based upon the moisture content of these particular uh, fodder. The succulent do contain 60 to 70%, whereas the dry roughage it contains especially the 10 to 15% of the moisture. So the moisture content is also very much required to the cattle as one of the feed ingredient. Then succulent roughages, once again, they are classified into the different things which are from the pasture. So whenever the cattle are led for grazing in a very huge pasture, then that makes the thing easy for the person and it reduces lot of cost, labor, energy, etc. Then also the money involved. If a farmer has got sufficient land and the cattle can grow or graze very easily, whereas the cultivated fodder crops are classified into two types. One is the leguminous fodders and another one is the very commonly known as non-leguminous fodders, which are very common in feeding the cattle. And another variety is the tree leaves. Varieties of the tree leaves are there, and the some of the crops are the root crops, which are originated from the roots. Whereas the silage is another technology where we can store the green fodder for longer time for the use in the situation when the fodder is not available, especially the succulent fodders are always available whenever there is sufficient moisture and there is facility of the irrigation. But during the dry seasons, the green grass cannot be stored for long unless we make them in the form of the silage. Hence, silage making is also another process which we need to know very well, and we need to know about the silage making, especially varieties of the silage making are there, and in due course, let us surely know this thing. Then coming to the dry roughages, or it's also called as the dry matter or dry fodder. So it is classified into several types. The number one is hay. What is the difference between hay and straw? Later we will know. The hay is a method of conserving the green crops, that of hay making. It's a process of storing the dry fodder and removing the moisture content as far as possible to the maximum extent and storing them without affecting their nutritive value and also without affecting or without making them to be affected by the pathogenic fungi which may produce the mycotoxin. So this hay is very much essential for the cattle in the entire year. It should be available along with the concentrates. Whereas the straw are poor in protein. Straw are poor in protein, whereas the hay is containing more and more protein and have largest percentage of the crude fiber. So you may be knowing the difference. Whereas the hay is one of the easily digestible roughage, whereas the straw is the one which is containing more and more crude fiber. So it is somehow more difficult to digested by the cattle. So they are comparatively poor in phosphorus and also calcium and also trace minerals which are very much required for the especially the making the complete cattle feed, what we can say. So they are comparatively poor in case of the phosphorus and calcium, which are very important ingredients for the production of the milk production, especially in the animals. But they are rich in sand silica. Of course, sand silica or the silica do not have any value in the nutrition, and hence it will be excreted in the dung as a source. Whereas the concentrates, a concentrate is usually described as a feed mixture which supplies primary the nutrients. So two types of the concentrates are there. Number one concentrate with very high energy rich concentrates. The another concentrate is of the protein rich concentrates. So the cattle also do require both the energy as well as the protein in certain proportions. And the beautiful capacity of the cattle or the ruminants is to convert the energy into the required protein, and the vice versa is also somewhat true. So we need to provide the proper energy and protein in the form of the concentrates. So what are all the energy rich concentrates? So the diets which are containing the energy are, especially the energy are diets which contains the energy. They, for example, the rice and wheat, they are grains and seeds. So rice is a very rich source of the energy. Immediately it can be digested by any type of the cattle, but it should be limited to a certain extent because it is easily digestible in the rumen, and immediately it will be converted to the lactic acid and may also induce the lactic acidosis. So this is one care need to be taken. But the rice and wheat do always deficient in certain minerals like the calcium, sodium, and also the chloride. These are all deficient, and we need to provide them exogenously. But these rice and wheat are a good source of vitamin B and E, of course, the B complex vitamins and vitamin E. But the problem with rice or wheat are they are the food of the human being. So hence we cannot directly put them into the cattle feed because we need to have the self-sustainability for the human beings first, then we will look after the cattle. So anything which is discarded for from the human use can only be come the feed of the cattle, and especially the rice and wheat, even though they are very rich in case of the energy, they cannot be feed as such to the cattle. And mill byproducts of these, for example, rice bran and wheat bran, are very commonly used as easily digestible uh, energy sources, especially. So you know that the wheat bran and rice bran, they are very commonly used, and they are also very cheap when compared to the rice or wheat. And at the same time, the human food resource cannot be made exhausted for the sake of the cattle rearing. That's also another aim in which we need to focus. So these are the energy rich concentrates. So we cannot feed either wheat or the rice too much. Immediately they are going to be converted to the lactic acid, either wheat or rice. Then they succumb to the acidosis and sometimes death also. Hence, there's in nature the cattle are not competing for the human food. Then another thing is the protein rich concentrates. To the human beings, lot of the protein rich diets are available in the form of the vegetable, the fruits, and also the meat, milk, egg, etc., which are animal products. But the animal, the oil seed cakes are the only sources of the protein, because the human is going to extract the oils from the different oil seeds. Then the cakes need to be discarded. But the thing is, ultimately, these will become the very good protein rich source for the cattle is concerned. For example, the cotton seed cake. Then the other cakes like the groundnut cake is one of the very important source of the proteins. Then soya cake. All these cakes are very much required to the cattle. And the brewers grains are also one of the source of the protein. Then sometimes the yeast and different types of the oil cakes are also used as protein rich concentrates. So they are protein rich, highly palatable to the cattle. Even the cattle are very much like the taste of these cakes and easily digested, and are generally used to balance rations of farm stock in respect of the protein. Maybe the cattle husbandry, sheep or goat husbandry, the oil cakes or cakes of any type of the grains, etc., they make very rich concentrate source for the proteins. So the feed of the animal origin, like milk, especially the milk powder, is used especially in the calf starter only, because the cost of the milk is also counts a high, especially in case of the cattle feed or the calf starters, and sometimes the broiler starters and many more things. Whereas the blood meal is another thing which is prepared from the blood which is collected from the slaughterhouse, then later dried and powdered. Whereas the bone meal, then fish meal, dried skim milk, then dried whey. All these are the feed of animal origin. So wherever these things are about to be discarded, then they are powdered and stored in a proper manner to be added as an animal protein. Directly, these are all the proteins. Once again, we need to see the cost of the protein also to make a balanced diet. Then, mineral supplement is also another component of the cattle feed. So, the minerals should contain many things, especially the sodium, calcium, potassium, chloride, zinc, phosphorus, sulfur, and these will be supplied by dicalcium phosphate, especially the calcium and phosphorus. Whereas the calcium is supplemented in form of the limestone, and sodium is supplemented from the salt along with the chloride. And these should be very cheap source of the minerals. And apart from this one, many trace minerals, maybe the minerals like copper, cobalt, ferrum, and many more things are also need to be added to the cattle feed is concerned. Then vitamin supplements, it may be natural or artificial. So natural vitamins are always obtained from the green grass, and also from sometimes the concentrates, and some of the leguminous fodders do also contain the vitamin B1 to B6, and sometimes the vitamin B12, and sometimes they also do contain vitamin A. So the non-nutritive feed additives, so they are used to improve the palatability process of the certain feed which is not palatable. Then some of the flavors we do not know. Then sweeteners like the molasses, etc., they are added to make the food more nutritive and also more palatable to the cattle, as the cattle do always like the sweet as per this literature. And also these molasses is also required to make the feed in the form of the pellet, and to prevent certain diseases also some antibiotics are put, probiotics are put, and sometimes the yeast, etc. And sometimes the hormones are also poured in some feed only, not all, because adding the hormone is not a routine practice, because many of the times the hormones are not absorbed through the oral route, and they need to be administered either parenteral or any other route which is intended for. Whereas the antibiotics are very commonly added in case of the poultry feed to prevent the unwanted growth of the bacteria in the intestine of the poultry. And sometimes this is also not so recommended because this may lead to the drug resistance, especially antibiotic resistance, etc. Whereas some pigments are also intended for use, especially this is more commonly used in case of the human food, but not in case of cattle feed. So the human, they always are being attracted by the color of the food, especially the ice creams, then many type of the ready to use feed, different type of the acceptable pigments or approved pigments which are non-toxic in nature, even non-carcinogenic in nature, and for prolonged period also they should not induce or damage any tissue related diseases. And sometimes to increase the digestion of the feed, the enzymes are also being added. Then apart from this one, the water is one of the very much required nutrient for any almost all types of the animals in this earth. Water is very much required. The H2O with any animal without water, it cannot be imagined by the human beings. Hence, this water, even though its cost is very, very low, it becomes one of the most essential nutrient, is considered as one of the most essential nutrient which is required for all types of the animal, including the farm animal, livestock, cattle, sheep, goat, pig, and poultry, whatever it may be. So in summer seasons, the water requirement becomes more, whereas in case of winter seasons and rainy seasons, it becomes less, as the evaporation from the body in form of the uh, urine, and also in the form of the sweat, and also in the form of the metabolic waste. All this make the requirement of the water in the daily life of an animal, maybe including the birds and reptiles, amphibians, bacteria, virus. Everything do require the water as one of the ingredients of their food. So, what are the alternative feeds for farm animal? Because 60%, sometimes up to 70%, the farm costs goes to the feed itself. Hence, we need to calculate the economy of a dairy farm or any other livestock farm in terms of the feed only. Hence, we need to go for the alternative feeds which are cheap in nature, and also the nutritive quality is comparatively it is okay. Then the why we need to go for the alternative sources of the feeds to farm animal is there is a scarcity, especially of the fodder, etc., due to the increased population and restriction in land use. The human population is increased, and because of this increase in the human population, uh, the land which is meant for grazing of the cattle is drastically being reduced due to the urbanization, and also due to the cultivation, land cultivation is increased, and hence the free land which is grazing for the cattle or sheep or goat is drastically because is reduced. And because of this thing, one need to cultivate the feed or the fodder. And because of the fodder cultivation, increasing prices of the animal feeds, so we need to search the alternative feeds for the farm animal. So this is apart from the conventional feed, what I have told, like the cakes, then sometimes the cereals, millets, grains. Then apart from the oil cakes, etc., the non-unconventional feeds such as the the conventional feeds are grass, corn, fish meal, etc. But in order to have a regular supply of low cost feed with proper nutritious variety, there is always research is going on and search is also going on. So the human being is in the search of the alternative food to the animal, and also his aim is to reduce the cost of feed from the minimum 60%, at least to the extent of 10% is also a very high reduction in the feed cost. And if you reduce the feed cost, automatically the profit from the farming will increase. Hence, the continuous uh, research is going on, ultimately the getting the alternative feed sources. So the number one of this thing is the crop residues and agro-industrial byproducts, and already we are using the crop residues as the feed source to the cattle. So the crop residues, mainly they are classified from into the different types of the straw, including the fatty straw. Then sugar cane is also another product which can be used as the sugar cane tops, dried sugar cane tops, and the bagasse, which is obtained after taking out the sugar content of a sugar cane. Then that can be dried and used as feed source. And apart from this one, the unconventional feed sources are the fodder trees, then also some crops which are grown in between the regular or the commercial crops. And sometimes the brewers industry waste are also being utilized. And sometimes the cereal waste, etc., are also being utilized as the alternative source of the feed to the animal. The aim is to reduce the cost of feed to a greater extent. And here the agro-industrial byproducts like the milling industry is one. Milling industry is number one here. Then we need to see that the oil cakes, rice bran is also the waste of the rice mills, and tons of this rice bran are generated from the rice mills every day. And rice polish, because the people want the white rice, and hence the outer coat of the paddy is removed to make them more and more looking very white, and this is wasted as rice polish. And apart from this one, the molasses also act as the source of the energy. Of course, it is nowadays very difficult to get the molasses because it requires the feed license to get the molasses. Then the canning industry. Many types of the canning industries are there nowadays, because nowadays it's an era of the packed foods like the fruit juices, vegetable, then fish and meat are the one which are from the canning industry outputs. So, lot of fruits are used for preparation of the juices. Then also the vegetables are also used for preparation of different human foods. Then the output of this thing or the wastage products of this thing can be used as the alternative feed source to the animal. Then apart from this one, the fish, especially the fish is a human food and also sometimes the carnivorous food, and the wastage of the meat industry, maybe sometimes the blood meal, and also the meat industries and the bone waste. All these things can be used, especially in case of the poultry feed or sometimes the pig feed also. The slaughterhouse waste are also used as alternative source of the animal feed, like the inedible part of the slaughterhouse, for example, the intestine, then the rumen contents, rumen, etc. They are inedible for the human being is concerned, whereas they can be processed in such a way that they can become the part of the animal feed. Then the animal waste can also be used for the production of the biogas slurry. Most of the time, the methane gas is used as the source of inflammation, especially for source of the fire. So the gobar gas, what we say, and it can be used as the biogas industries or slurries, and poultry manure can also be used as the sometime the feed for the fish and the ducklings, and also sometimes the fish can be grown in the multiple farm programs wherein which the excreta of one animal is the food of the other animal, and that type of the multiple tier system is being invented to reduce the cost of the feed. And sometimes the 100% digestion cannot be expected from all the animals, and the excreta of those animals may be the food of sometimes the aquatic animals like fish, and they can grow very well. So this is the different type of the farming situation wherein which we need the importance of the farm animal feed steps. They provide the nutrition to the animal, to the farm animal especially. So we need to put the feed to the animal every day to get a very good milk, and to prevent the disease of the diseases, especially in farm animal, if a proper protein is available to the animal, then the antibodies, then also the defense mechanism can be built very well. Hence, we need to provide the good quality proteins so that a proper amino acids are synthesized in the animals to form different type of the self defense mechanism, the neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. Then, apart from this one, many type of the neurotransmitters, being the endogenous substances, are also synthesized from the protein what we give to the animal. So the animal feedstuffs help in quality production. For example, the low SNF content in a feed of milk of the animal is always attributed to the low quality feeding or poor quality feeding. The farmers feed the succulent grass to the animals instead of putting the dry matter in the proper time, and also providing low quality green grass. At that time, there will be a drastic reduction in the SNF. Then it's very difficult to correct that situation. So, proper feeding is always should be required, and it should be sustainable. Then economical sustainability is also dependent on the based on the animal feedstuffs, because the 60% cost is always goes to the cattle feed in the form of the fodder or the concentrate. So this is a common practice in throughout the earth, what we can say, or the many countries which are depending on the cattle feed. For example, the fish do not require any additional feeding because they are predatory animals. They are living from especially hunting another fish. Say a smaller fish is a food of the bigger fish, and they will always search in the food in the sea, and they are abundant source of the protein to the human being. So the farm animals do differ because they need to be stall fed, and because of the low availability of the grazing field, these are always depending upon the human beings for the provision for their food is concerned. Hence, to conclude, the classification of this feed, etc. In a nutshell, what we can say is the Indian livestock, they play a very important role in case of the sustainable and economic life of the rural community of the India is concerned. Hence, the farming system, livestock farming system, is contributing to the extent of 4.8% of the GDP of India, and especially 24% of the agriculture GDP. And this is a very important source of income to most of the rural people. Hence, we need to feed the livestock in a proper manner. Then, apart from this one, the animals are also being used as a draft animals. So, these are used for cultivation of the land. At the same time, different types of the food products of human consumption and income generation is also another source of the livestock, and therefore the proper feeding up of the livestock becomes very essential, and we need to focus on getting the good quality feed in terms of the green grass, and also cultivation of the high quality protein supplementation diets like the groundnut cake, then also the leguminous fodder, and also the succulent and very green fodder, or different types of the straws, the ragi straw, the paddy straw, the maize, and many more type of the hay or the straw. Therefore, proper feeding up of the livestock is very much required for the successful dairy husbandry or the livestock feeding is concerned. Hence, this is the end of the particular topic, especially for the classification of the feed is concerned. And the thing is, we need to go for